Hi, everybody. In the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. We know there are still more people entering the waiting room, but we want to make sure that we have enough time to get to everything tonight. So I want to welcome all of you and thank you for taking the time to come out tonight. And I also want to thank my colleagues from all of these different synagogues who have worked harder and faster than we knew we could do to try and get this all together for you. And I'm going to specifically thank them also. Please give me a second to thank from Central Synagogue, Rabbi Rebecca Rosenthal, from Temple Israel of the City of New York, Rabbi Melissa Beyer-Whitman, from Congregation Emmanuel of the City of New York, Michael Whitman, from B'nai Jeshurun, Rabbi Dina Cowan, from East End Temple, Mindy Sherry, from Conservative Synagogue Adath Israel of Riverdale, Mason Voigt, from Congregation Rodef Shalom, Kareth Braunfeld, and I am representing Stephen Wise Free Synagogue, and it is a pleasure to see you all here with us. And I'm going to turn it to my colleague.
Thank you. So we want to be very clear about our goals tonight. First, we wanted to create a safe space for us to gather. While we all come from different communities, we share in our concern for the state of Israel, and our hearts rightly grieve for the news that is emerging with each and every passing minute. Number two, we wanted to provide wisdom and tools that we can use as parents or even personally to help us navigate this unprecedented and terrifying time. And finally, we gather in solidarity and support of the state of Israel, the people of Israel, and to offer each other much needed support. So thank you so much for being here. Many of you submitted questions, and we will attempt to address as many as we can. If we somehow, by miracle, end up with extra time, we will look to the chat, so you can certainly provide questions in the chat as well. Just know that we're likely not going to be able to answer all of these questions, but each of us here, all of your educators, your clergy, we can be contacted, and please do reach out. Our offices, our inboxes, our phones are open to offer you further support and assistance. And without any other further ado, I turn it over to Rabbi Rosenthal.
Hello, everyone. It really, as my colleague said, it is great to see so many people here tonight. Although this is not a topic that any of us wanted to be talking about, I want to introduce our presenter for the evening, Dr. Samantha Vinokur-Meinrath, who is the Senior Director of Knowledge, Ideas, and Learning at the Jewish Education Project. She's a lifelong Jewish educator and learner, and she's lived and worked in communities in Israel, Washington, D.C., Cleveland, and New York. She's a recognized expert in Israel education, Jewish teens, anti-Semitism education, and Jewish peoplehood. So as you can imagine, she's been very busy this week. She's the author of #Anti-Semitism, Coming of Age During the Resurgence of Hate, a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award in the category of Education and Jewish Identity. She is an alumna of the University of Pittsburgh, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and Gratz College. Samantha lives in Westchester with her husband, baby, and 2 beloved rescue dogs. And I will just also add to her bio that she has come to Central to teach our teens and our staff and our parents. And every time we have found her expertise to be incredibly worthwhile. So we're so grateful that she raced home from a board meeting so that she could be with us this evening. So I'm going to turn it over now to Samantha.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you, the synagogues that have put this evening together, and to all of the parents and all of the caregivers who are on this call tonight. Just one housekeeping note on Zoom calls, I always ask for the line about the 2 beloved rescue dogs to be in the bio, because if and when they start barking, know that there is trauma there. And thank you in advance for your kindness. Since I wrote the book, #Anti-Semitism, which was published about 1.5 years ago, I often start webinars and teaching opportunities by saying, I wish that I was being invited to talk about literally anything other than anti-Semitism. And I start tonight saying, I would give anything to have been invited tonight to talk to you about anti-Semitism. While of course we will talk about anti-Semitism, the world has changed for all of us in such diametric ways in just a few days. It's a lot. It's awful. It is in some ways unspeakable, and in other ways, we have to speak about it. And we're in community tonight. because we want to talk about it. We want to figure out, how do we grapple with hatred? How do we grapple with violence? How do we grapple with things that are not supposed to happen? And how do we tell our children about it? The like ultimate, oh my God, how do we do this? Everything that I'm going to say is both collective and personal for so many of us. And I would actually really love to frame in the personal. We don't have time because of the beautifully abundant number of people on this call to ask everyone to tell their own story at this moment. But if anyone feels called to and wants to write into the chat at this moment, the name of someone in Israel that you're thinking about, the name of someone who connects you to what is happening right now. And if you don't have someone specifically in Israel who you're thinking about, the name of someone who compelled you to be here today, someone who you're thinking about, and just we want to honor all that brought us here. And while wait to see if the chat populates, thank you. I will share just some of what compels me to be here today and to be here right now. I'm from New York. I'm from Long Island. I grew up in a very active Jewish household, went to public school, was a profoundly nerdy kid, and my Jewish identity, and in particular, my connection to Israel, gave me a sense of home. I have an Israeli dad, grew up and was not a camp person, went to Israel in the summers the way that other people went to camp to visit family, to spend time, to be able to be the best version of myself. And Israel has been that for me for many years. I have Israeli citizenship. I have an Israeli husband. My sister lives in Israel, all of the things. I have never felt both closer to and further from Israel than this moment when I'm speaking from Westchester. And I obviously cannot speak for everyone here and what your own connections are that drove you to want to be here tonight. But when I woke up on Saturday morning and first saw something was happening on the southern border with Israel, and I have dear friends who live in kibbutzim on the southern border of Israel. And so I sent my usual first round of texts, something quite honestly really snarky. Not to be that American who reaches out every time something happens, but like, you good? And then I saw that the check marks on the WhatsApp screen did not turn blue like they are supposed to. Because when you text someone and then they see it in WhatsApp, it turns blue. And it didn't happen. And it didn't happen for 12 hours. Thank God my story at this moment is still at least personally okay one. My friends did survive and are alive and are traumatized, but are there. There are thousands of people who are not as lucky. And I'm sure there are people on this call who are not as lucky or who are a single degree removed from that. And I just want to really honor all that we are all holding in being here tonight. There's a lot that we can talk about. We could talk about like the really practical, how did we get to this place as a Jewish community, as Israel, as the world? What does it mean? What do we do now? What should we have done? What can we be doing? And I read through the questions that people sent in as they registered, and I'd like to speak to essentially 4, maybe 5, because different buckets before turning it over to more specific questions depending on the time. You asked about anti-Semitism. You asked about safety and how we can tell our kids that they're safe and what it means to feel safe. You asked about silence and the silence that so many of us and our kids are feeling from outside of the Jewish community, or from people who we expected to or would have wanted to show up there for us. And you asked about what you're supposed to be doing. How do you start the conversation? When do you start the conversation? What do you talk about in the conversation? So those are the pieces that I'm going to proactively touch on. And again, please feel free to populate the chat throughout with questions. I'm happy to bob and weave and to incorporate and then to answer specific questions as time permits. All right, so what do we say and when? The first thing that I will say is to quote my amazing colleague, Dr. Sivan Zakai, who is an expert on talking to children about Israel, who said on a call that the two of us did just yesterday, if your child is old enough to talk, they are old enough to talk about Israel. They may, of course, not be old enough to talk about complexities and nuance and grapple with evil and horror in the world. But ultimately, all of our kids, we know they're amazing. They are so much more and can take so much more and pick up on so much more than any of us know. Any of us who, I have an 18-month-old, who've ever had a toddler at home, realize they know everything and they capitalize on it at, the times you don't want them to. So it can start at just a really simple, again, developmentally appropriate level. I'm really sad right now. I, as your parent, as your caregiver, as the grown-up in your life, home might feel different right now because we're having a really hard time. I'm sad because of things that have happened to the Jewish people. And to let them know, because they are picking up on the anxiety, and on the stress and on differences in how we're behaving. And we can all put on our happy faces and put on our masks, but truly only for so long. And to let them in and to let them know, there's a reason I'm sad and I'm not upset with you. And there's something happening. And I just want you to know that it affects us because we're part of the Jewish people. Then there's the other questions. When am I supposed to talk about specifics? When am I supposed to let them know about the true graphic atrocities that those of us who cannot look away and have been doing the doom scrolling that my official professional recommendation to you would be don't do. You're doing it. I'm doing it. I'm just acknowledging that. When do we talk about all of those things? So first of all, we don't gaslight our kids in the same way that we wouldn't about pretty much any other topic. If they ask a question, to the extent that you are able to, you answer that question, whatever that question might be. Are people dying? Unfortunately, the answer is yes, people are dying. To necessarily then have to go into the graphic details of how some of these people died, would I proactively do that? Not necessarily, but if they ask, did this happen? We want them to hear from trusted sources, from you, from the places where they can feel comfortable and have someone who is there to reassure them. The world is a really scary place right now. Things have been bad, and we are doing everything we can. I am doing everything that I can to keep you safe. I think the context for that, when people ask what's happening so far away, there's an anxiety of, can it come here? Can it happen here? And to make sure that they can feel comfortable and secure in their homes, in the institutions where we spend time, to the extent, again, that we are authentically able to say, we are doing everything we can, the adults in your life, the caregivers in your life, to keep them safe. Sivan also, I feel like I'm going to be fangirling her for a while because she said things so succinctly in some pieces that she's been producing lately, and I'm happy to share them afterwards as well. Gave a distinction that I really want to name. Don't avert kids' eyes, but don't let them see. So what does that mean? Many of us received communications yesterday saying, delete your kids' social media, or have a conversation with them about getting off Instagram and TikTok because of the videos and the images that are going to be coming. There's something really tangible about that makes all of us feel like, okay, I did something. I had an action that I could take. I could get off of social media. And for those for whom, by the way, that works for you and your family, I am not here to say anything wrong. But ultimately, we do know we are not keeping today's teens and tweens and some even younger, wherever your family starts, wholly off social media. And ultimately, we don't want to. There are plenty of wonderful, developmentally appropriate, healthy outlets coming from social media, and particularly at a moment like this, where they can feel really isolated, or feel like, I want to see solidarity opportunities. Maybe I've been to Israel and I want to be able to check in on the friends of mine who I met on my bus with my camp or my youth group or my synagogue. We connect through social media now, and we can have a whole separate webinar about the pros and cons of that. That is so not why anyone would ever call me. I'm just acknowledging that is a thing. So they're on it. But there is a huge difference between everything else that someone can see and watching truly violent, gruesome videos where what I will like very much say, there is no reason to put any of our souls through seeing what some of these videos have to offer. If a video is pixelated, if a picture is pixelated, there is a reason. We don't need to pick at our own wounds and click on it to say, I want to see even more. We've seen too much. We have heard too much. We know way too much. And so do they. So to be able to have a conversation about boundaries, a colleague of mine shared that for her own kids, she had said, you can read anything you want, don't click on the videos. And I think that if a kid is old enough to be on social media, they're old enough to have that conversation, that there are things that we don't have to see just because we could. This isn't something that it's like kind of like fun to look at. These are things that you don't need to see, that none of us need in our lives to that extent. But again, we don't want to avert our eyes. We need to know what's happening. We need to be aware and not be silent of the atrocity in the world without putting that extra trauma onto ourselves, because no human needs that. So that's some of the talking points about different ways to start the conversation and different entry points into it. Again, please feel free to ask if there are specifics that I didn't get to that didn't synthesize your question in that area. Then we get to talk, sticking with the social media lens, about silence. I am very, very deeply lucky that I work in the Jewish world. I did not, and I can't imagine those of you who went to work on Monday or Tuesday to places that are not within the bubble of the Jewish community and had to explain. I'm shell-shocked right now, and legitimately, if you're not an avid watcher of the news, you might not even know. There's a huge difference between someone who genuinely doesn't know and someone who knows and says nothing. So I also want to have that lens and assume the best of the people in our lives until they give us a reason not to. So while my world is very much within the Jewish community, it is not exclusively. I have hobbies, I have friends. And I will very candidly say to literally hundreds of people, there are exactly 2 non-Jews in my life who have reached out to me in the last 4 days. And I am not just Jewish. I am professionally Jewish. I am visibly Jewish. People who I went to college with called me Israel girl, because you can say I was a really cool kid. Everyone who knows me knows this about me. And that's, by the way, a choice that we can have, again, a separate conversation when we talk about anti-Semitism and the hats that we put on and take off. My story does not have to be anyone else's here. There is nobody in my life, even in the most tangential way, who does not know that I am Jewish, who does not know that my husband is Israeli, that my son is Israeli, that I have an Israeli passport, that my sister got married in Tel Aviv 6 weeks ago, that I was there for that. There's nobody who doesn't know that. And there are 2 people in my life who reached out to me. The silence is deafening when you're asking for it, when you're expecting it, when you or your kids are allies who have shown up for others and continue to do so, because our allyship is not conditional. We care about the things that we care about, and we care about the people that we care about. And that's amazing of all of us. But to say, where are you? What is this? What's happening? For an adult, that's really hard. For a kid, for a teen to say, my world feels so bifurcated right now. In the Jewish spaces where I spend time, this is the entire world. We have stopped. This is what we are talking about. And then I go to school and there's a math test today. But last night I was supposed to be at a rally and a vigil, and my mom is crying, and my clergy member is telling my mom that she has to be on a Zoom call at 9 o'clock at night to talk to me about this. And I have to study for my math test. And my friends didn't ask me about it. And I don't know if my friends didn't ask me about it, again, because they don't know, because they don't care, because they don't know that they're supposed to care, or because in a really legitimate way, being a adolescent is awkward, and maybe they do know and they do care and they do know that they're supposed to care, but how do they come up to me and say, hey, I heard that like other Jewish people were massacred. How are you doing today here in the hallway? That's like, what a sentence and what a world to have to say that. The burden of the social interaction is tremendous. We need to be able to give voice to that to our kids, to allow them to be disappointed by those who are not showing up, to give the benefit of the doubt, and to maybe help them give the benefit of the doubt to the extent that they're comfortable, to real people in their lives, who they're waiting for a reaction that maybe hasn't come yet. Are they comfortable to say, like, hey, this is happening. Do you guys know about it? Or I'm having a rough day. This is why, to allow them to open that conversation with their trusted friends. Their trusted friends and the trolls of the internet are not the same people. I just really want to make that clear. And that is a completely different relationship. Likewise, their trusted friends and the celebrities who they follow and who they're waiting on, it's different. And to let them process that disappointment, because it's like really real. And for many of them, it might be the first time that they are seeing a silence that impacts them in these ways. And we can talk about, are there places where we have been silent? Are there places where we can reach out and can do better now that we know and have felt this? But also just for today and for tomorrow, we can say, this sucks. Like, it is so not fair that people are being quiet when we want support and want and need help. Okay, safety. There are a bunch of questions about safety, and I'm going to talk about online safety, in-person safety, and a little bit about, to the extent that we can grapple with it, the existential safety. In-person safety. We are so fortunate to be in spaces where taking safety seriously is not new for so many of us. Maybe we're not fortunate. Maybe it's like the tragedy of the world that we are so well versed in what it means to make spaces safe. And we have done and continue to do work on being better about it. But in terms of thinking about what does it mean for a space to be safe for some, for all, for the diversity and the breadth and depth of our communities. But at this time, I think we're actually in a really strong place when it comes to being able to say our community is set up to be secure. We know we can talk about gun violence again another time. We can talk about so many different things. We know that our kids know what it is to not feel safe in so many of the spaces where they should, and they should be able to, and that we want them to feel that way. But when they're asking right now, is what's happening there going to come here? Again, we can reassure them of safety, and I very much believe that we should. They don't need that extra burden beyond what they already have to think about terrorism in this unspeakable way coming here at this time. We're not gaslighting them. We're not saying that nothing bad has ever or can ever happen in New York. We know that it has and it can, but they are okay. Internet safety is a whole thing as well. And we touched on it a bit in terms of the videos, but also just thinking about what it means to be able to feel safe with the device that we carry in our pockets. And for those of us, I'll raise my hand first, no one else has to, who lack boundaries and are literally going to sleep with our devices. When I was in high school, and there are people on this call who I was in high school with, because I saw their names in the chat, if someone was bullying you, it's bad. It sucks. It is awful. It is not okay. You could go home. You could go home and you could turn it off to whatever extent. And you didn't know if you weren't invited to the party because you didn't find out about it until 3 days later, when people were back in school after the weekend and you had done something else and it was totally fine. Now we know everything that everyone is doing in their curated ways, as we all know, in real time. We're going to sleep with it. We are waking up with it. And right now we are going to sleep with horror stories, and we are waking up with additional horror stories. And we're going to bed and we're waking up and we are going all day with buzzes telling us about atrocities and showing us anti-Semitism. If there's anything that the COVID-19 pandemic taught, I think, many of us in terms of a lasting change, is that while previously we might have given a distinction of online versus real life for our kids, we now know real life is happening online. There is online life and there is in-person life, and they are equally important and impactful. They are just different. And safety looks different, and relationships look different, and the choices that we make look different in any of those spaces. So if in relation to what is happening right now, your child experiences, and I sincerely hope this does not happen, but recognize that it very well may and maybe has already, an experience of anti-Semitism, an anti-Semitic comment that is made in person, there's a different response than anti-Semitism that they see online. In person, we know how to presumably interact, to call someone in or to call someone out, to report someone and say they said something that wasn't okay. There was bullying, there was hate speech. They have made me feel uncomfortable and other because I am Jewish. We know what to do. And we encourage our kids regularly in any area of their lives, if someone is making you uncomfortable, if someone is bullying you, to name it and to not let it stand. We should. That is good. At the same time, when it comes to online, it can feel really disempowering, because what I'm going to say is almost the exact opposite. Report it as hate speech if it falls under a category of hate speech. Unfollow, unfriend, block, whatever device or platform someone is on. But largely the wisdom that I will give is to keep scrolling and don't engage. Because when we engage with anti-Semitic content online, all that it does is direct the algorithm to highlight more anti-Semitic content, which is really hard, because our kids and us, and I'll say like my dad, because like, hello boomer, want to engage, want to tell people online why what they are saying is wrong, why what they are saying is offensive. If, by the way, that is like just an outlet that you need for like a 1 minute thing, that I will say, you know, on Sunday that I was reading, don't read the comments, but I was reading the comments on a Washington Post article, and all I wanted to do was to comment on every single one. Your anti-Semitism is showing. Your anti-Semitism is showing. These are not hard and fast rules. If you want to be the person who goes through and comments your anti-Semitism is showing, I wish you well of it. But largely, when it comes to healthy boundaries for our kids, don't engage in an online exchange about anti-Semitism or about pretty much anything in this space. It's not worth it. It's not worth the emotional labor that they are then going to be putting into trying to change the opinions of the trolls on the internet. If it's someone they really know, if it's someone in their school coming and posting misinformation about Israel, posting anti-Semitic content online, then it becomes different. And then we could say, how do you take that conversation offline? What does it mean to feel confident, to the extent that they can, to say, hey, I saw you posted this. Like, what did you mean by that? And when we can, to not enter with accusation, but to genuinely enter with question. What did you think with that? Do you know that I'm Jewish and that what's happening to the Jewish people? Like, are you sure you know what that meant? Like, allow for someone to walk back genuine mistakes and missteps that they have made. If your child very reasonably also is not comfortable, like, oh my God, Samantha said that I have to go ask my friends about the memes they post online. Like, that's horrifying. There are times where, and I would largely say with their consent, but leave that up to you to decide, that others can take that step for them. I would never say, and I really am not saying, that your child should say, that kid posted something anti-Semitic online. So now I, as the mom, am going to call that person's mom and say they were anti-Semitic online. Like, that's your boundaries, and the decisions that you make about how you and your children govern their relationships. But all of us on this call, and I am volunteering all of your clergy, are so ready to anonymize pretty much anything and make phone calls on your behalf to say to a school, so that way one specific child doesn't have to worry about being the one who said something. We're receiving information that kids in the 8th grade class are sharing anti-Semitic content online. Here are resources that can help your teacher, your school, your community figure out how to deal with this. We are here to help and to be partners in this work of making sure that our kids can feel safe and secure and thrive in their Jewish identities. We're ready for it. And we've been ready for it before. And I'm hoping everyone's going to nod along, because I did just volunteer all of you, and you're good. You're ready. I want to say one more thing about anti-Semitism before going to questions. And again, please feel free to populate the chat with them. Otherwise, I can continue to monologue. Anti-Semitism is not the fault of the Jewish people. Anti-Semitism is not the fault of the actions of the state of Israel. Anti-Semitism has predated any of us and any of this. There are a lot of questions coming through in all of the spaces that I am speaking that are saying, what do we do if people are like going to become anti-Semitic because of Israel right now, of Israel retaliating, of Israel this, of Israel that? What if they become anti-Semitic? Nobody is becoming anti-Semitic because of what is happening to Israel, to Israelis at this moment. They may be galvanized in their latent anti-Semitism. They may not have context for it and not really understand what is happening and fall into traps of anti-Semitism. But nobody became anti-Semitic because of this moment. And it is not the responsibility of any one of us, any one member of the Jewish community, or quite frankly, even the Jewish community as a whole, to figure out, how do we fix anti-Semitism? How do we stop people from being anti-Semitic because of or separate from what is happening in Israel, any more so than I am choosing to assume anyone on this call would say it's the responsibility of the LGBTQ plus community to fix homophobia. If you would not say that, if you would not say that it is the responsibility of women and female identified individuals to fix rape culture, it is not the responsibility of the Jewish people to fix anti-Semitism. And it's really hard because we want to fix anti-Semitism. We don't want there to be anti-Semitism. We want to be able to have a world that doesn't hate us for our Judaism and other us for our Jewish identities. And we want to see steps that we can take towards creating that world. And by the way, I do that all day. My book was called #Anti-Semitism. I'm an inadvertent anti-Semitism educator, and we want to do all the things. And we know best practices to say, we want to show Jewish joy, and we want to normalize Jewish voices and include and incorporate Jewish voices. And there are plenty of proactive things that we can do to positively impact society's impression of Jews. That is in no way what I'm saying that we all shouldn't be doing that. But the burden that our kids can take onto themselves of trying to fix someone else's anti-Semitism, to solve somebody else's hatred, we need to set them up for success and let them know that is not their responsibility. Their responsibility is to thrive as human beings in their Jewish identities, incorporating their Jewish joys and journeys into the complex, amazing people that each of them are, to call in and call out anti-Semitism if and when they see it in the world. But it is not theirs to fix, and it's okay. And they need to know that that is not a burden that any of us are putting onto them. I'm actually going to pause there for a moment to ask if anyone wants to jump in with questions, and otherwise I'll make a couple of more points. And I don't know if anything was private sent, Mason. I know you were. Okay, I guess I am.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's possible that only I got the questions.
Amazing, great.
I have a couple of questions. The question is really about hate groups, especially college campuses. What do you do for kids when they're on campus and they're seeing all kinds of scary things? There was a reference to Harvard and what happened there.
Great. So many different things. There are, so college campuses, we know as a Jewish community, we like to talk a lot about how scary colleges campuses can be at this moment. The first thing I want to do is not add to people's fear. College campuses are really complex places. They are places throughout generations where emotions are heightened. People are figuring out who they are. And there's a lot of passion and fervor that comes into that. And unfortunately, particularly in the last, I'm say 20-ish years, probably longer, often that manifests as anti-Israel sentiment and anti-Semitism. Things that we can do. First of all, to be in the spaces that make sense for your child to be in, and to be in community with the people who it makes sense for them to be in community with. If every single kid who I have ever educated in the years of my work as a Jewish educator comes to me and says, I became the president of Hillel at whatever college I wound up going to, amazing. I will count it as a personal victory. I will tell everyone that I was part of getting them to those places. If they don't, and they get involved with a fraternity or ultimate frisbee or are really intense about their pre-med major and their a cappella group, but they are confident in showing up to those spaces Jewishly as their full selves, I will equally, if somehow I find out about this reality, tell everyone who I know that I was part of that person being able to show up as their full selves. So they should be in Jewish spaces to the extent that that brings them joy. Go to Hillel, go to Chabad, find the Israel organization on campus, find the spaces that are going to bring them Jewish joy. And show up yesterday in the other spaces that matter to them. Build relationships in the places that align with their values, align with their politics, align with their hobbies, to allow for there to be a Jewish voice around all of those tables before there's a crisis moment. Again, this is not a burden on them. I'm not saying if you were never going to go join the a cappella group, show up to make sure there's a Jew there. I'm in no way saying that any of them need to take that on. But what does it mean to show up to all of these places Jewishly and to say, like, yes, this is who I am. And if I'm not allowed into that space because I'm Jewish, we have a problem. In New York, we know in a different way necessarily than the rest of the country. We know that we're minorities, but we don't always feel it in the same way as when I speak to people literally anywhere else. There's a beauty in that. It's amazing to be Jewish in New York. And a lot of our students have not necessarily grappled with what it means to be a minority. They are protected as minorities at the universities that they will go to. They don't always think to say the Office of Minority Affairs, that applies to me. And again, I'm speaking in broad generalizations. The Jewish community is not monolithic. We have many Jews of color who grapple with what it means to be an intersectional minority on a regular basis. And I'm not here to speak to or for their experience, but to just recognize we can show up Jewishly and say, I am a minority here and I need to be supported, protected, etc. There are relationships outside of university systems and within university systems that they need to know about and be able to take advantage of, whether it's Hillel, whether it's every place in the United States where they might be has a Jewish Community Relations Council that covers that area. And that if there is an incident where they are genuinely feeling threatened and othered for their Judaism and for their Jewish identities, there are people who are there to be able to help them, to be able to figure out what title does this fall under to the extent that it wants to escalate in these ways. Beyond that, when it's just genuinely people are mean, people don't understand, people are hateful, people maybe do understand, but are understanding in what I would say is like the wrong way. People are spreading misinformation and lies. To figure out how to build the community and the coalitions and the support and the allies that each of us need in order to thrive, it's really hard. And I'm with all of them in navigating that complexity and what it means to show up and say not only my peers might be like against me, but wait, my faculty member might be, and the administration at my school. It can go up really high, and that can feel really intimidating. So also just so that they know, there are resources both within and outside of the campus that are designed to help them feel comfortable, feel safe, and feel able to flourish.
We've gotten a couple of questions about both about messages that schools like elementary and middle schools and high schools send out that sort of reek of both sides ism. How might you approach your school in helping them to take a more productive tone and a more proactive approach to this?
Yeah, so it's really complex. Also to acknowledge that there are many voices at this moment. I am very candidly going to say I'm not in a place of nuance right now. What is happening to Israel and to Israelis is wrong. It is heinous. There will be moments, and there are moments, that we can talk about complexity and about geopolitics and what it means to be in power and to not be in power, and to be a minority and to feel like a minority, and so many different things. This is not a both sidesism moment. Massacring people is wrong. There is not another point of view in that regard. At the same time, we know that just like a moment like this can bleed into anti-Semitism, it can bleed into Islamophobia. And we, of course, are here to make sure that that also should not be happening. We can provide language like that to schools, and to say and to name, we're in a moment, and especially our kids, so many of them have learned through the best of intentions that in order for something to be good, it needs to not come with bias. That if something is biased, that's not good, because we know that bias is bad. I am here to, sorry, everything has bias. Everything comes with bias. I had in May 2021, the last real bout of violence between Israel and Hamas. I was still living and teaching in the Cleveland Jewish community at the time. And like many of us attended yesterday, the Jewish Federation had a rally in support of Israel, because that is one of the things that we do. And we take pleasure and joy and comfort in gathering visibly as a community to say, we're here and we're proud and we're together. And I went to the rally because that is what we do, or what some of us do, what I do. I don't know what everyone else does in their spare time. And a mom of a teen who I was working with at the time came up to me and said, "You have to go call my daughter and yell at her for not being here today." First of all, I hope that all of you know that in your relationship with Jewish educators, none of us are going to call your kids and yell at them. That would not be good for our relationships with them or your relationships with them. So I essentially said, what? And she said, "You have to go call my daughter. You have to yell at her. She said that she wasn't going to come today because this was a one-sided event and it was biased and it wasn't about both sides. And you have to go tell her that she's wrong." And then I had to say, well, she's not wrong. This is a one-sided event. This is a biased event. This is a rally for the Jewish community in support of Israel. That is bias. I'm very comfortable in the space of that bias, that I'm showing up in support of Israel. There are other spaces where I will show up in support of peace, in support of humanity, in support of insert whatever else here. But there are times where it is okay to say, I am particularly showing up for the Jewish community. I am particularly showing up for Israel. And ultimately, while I cannot and will not call anyone's child and yell at them, what I did end up doing was calling her daughter and inviting her to go out for frozen yogurt and having a conversation about why she felt uncomfortable showing up in a space that was not multi-sided, that was out and avowed, this is support for Israel. Support for Israel does not have to be, and it is a failure of communications, if nothing else, anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim, anti-Islam. Support for Israel is support for Israel. That can be enough.
I know you touched on this earlier, but especially for those of us who have little kids in the house who maybe don't know what's going on, how do you both sort of continue, and I know you have one too, continue on with making their lives a little bit normal and protecting yourself from sort of the onslaught of everything that this moment demands?
Or such a good question. So on, I don't know the choices everyone else made. On Saturday, I spent most of the day, again, doom scrolling in mute horror. And then I have an 18-month-old, and I took him to a synagogue here in Westchester to do mini hakafot, and he held a stuffed animal Torah and did 7 rounds around the sanctuary. And I smiled the entire time. And then I got into the car and cried in a way that I cannot even describe what came over me. We are called to experience life and to experience joy and to experience Jewish joy. And there should be no guilt about saying, I am aware, I am holding the horrors of the world right now. And it's my kid's bat mitzvah this weekend. And I want them to be able to laugh and smile and be happy in the world, and to know that their Judaism goes beyond pain and beyond horror. I want them to be able, by the way, not just Jewishly, I really want to go pumpkin picking. It has rained every single weekend, and I want a picture of my child picking a pumpkin. And sometimes we do want to choose joy and to want to choose life, and there's something super legitimate about that. A couple of just like more existential points I want to make in that regard. The first one being, there's no one time, unfortunately, that will like have the conversation about the war in Israel and then like check plus, kind of like, I don't know, any other major talked about Israel today, good to go. This is, and I am not setting the pace for it well at all. This is not going to be a sprint. This is going to be a marathon. This is not going to be, this was not over in 72 hours. This is not going to be over for a while. There will be plenty of opportunities to continue having the conversation and coming back to the conversation like we do so many important topics. What's happening and why do we care? And like the fatigue will set in of, oh my God, I still have to be upset, and I still have to go look at all these faces because I feel compelled and called to do so. And like self-preservation, I can't keep looking. It's all going to set in. And we want our kids to find joy, because a Jewish identity that is shaped by the hatred of the world, by anti-Semitism, is not sustainable. Deborah Lipstadt, before she was the special envoy on anti-Semitism, when she was still Professor Lipstadt, told a story of a student of hers, a former student of hers, who came to her office when she was a professor at Emory, and had started wearing a kippah and said, I'm going to take on this practice of wearing a kippah. And great. Hope that goes well in terms of the Jewish identity. But then they shared with her that the reason they were doing so is because there's all these anti-Semites out there, and I want them to know that like they're not going to win, and I am defiant and loud and proud and all these different things. It's a tactic, and I'm sure there are those of us on the call who maybe yesterday, the day before, said, I don't always wear a Jewish star, but today I want to show people who I am and that I'm loud and proud. Or that I maybe sometimes do wear a Jewish star and I'm nervous today and I'm sticking it inside my collar when I'm going on the subway because I don't really want to invite the commentary of the world. All legitimate answers. When our Jewish choices are being made in response to hatred, it's not sustainable for us. We want our kids, and we want all of us, to have a Jewish identity that's based on the things that matter to us, that's based on food and culture and tradition and prayer and tefillah, if that's your thing, and Israel, and you can all insert like what makes Jewish life joyful and meaningful for you, on family, on all the things. And that's what's going to sustain our kids' Jewish identities and Jewish connections, far more than we talk about Jewish life when there's a crisis.
So I kind of want to end on that question, but I am going to ask you one more question because there's a lot of questions in the chat, and I want to ask, which is, we know, and you've said that this is going to be a long experience. How do you, this is sort of the opposite of how do you protect yourself? How do you help your kids continue to know what's going on and continue to sustain engagement when it feels farther away and when it's kind of gone from the front page?
Yeah. I feel like we have this, I mean, we have collectively very short attention spans, and people know about this more so than ever. And the fatigue sets in really, really fast. Somebody asked me, and as I think it was said, as you were introducing me, I was speaking at our board meeting for the Jewish Education Project right before coming here. And someone had asked, like, how many webinars are you doing next week? I was like, oh my God. We have to keep going. Oh, okay. Again, marathon and not a sprint. So what does that mean? Everyone will make their own decisions. Does it mean we do an Israel check-in in like religious school at a certain cadence to say we want to keep informed as like a current events thing of what's happening, and we want to make sure is that we're going to tell the stories not of tragedy necessarily, but of heroism and of, I mean, well, like I'm a Mr. Rogers fan, to say we want to keep thinking about who are the helpers, who are the people who are doing and being good in the world at this moment, and to allow space to keep those voices known and acknowledged. This will continue to be in the news. It will continue to be in the media, but it quite frankly might not stay first page. And if it does stay first page, it might not be for the reasons that we would want it to. So figuring out what are the Israel conversations that are happening in your home and in your community, and were they happening enough last week, and what is enough going to look like moving forward? I regularly get called to do like a session for kids are about to go to college, and can you come and talk about Israel to them and tell them why they're supposed to care about Israel on college campus? And then I, before I stopped asking the question, used to ask the question of like, what's the last time you talked about Israel with this person? And it was, oh, well, it was in their third grade curriculum or their bat mitzvah. And we should talk about Israel in third grade. And we should talk about Israel in adolescence and at the age of 12 and 13. And if we didn't talk about it last week, this is an amazing opportunity to say, what are all the other times that we're just going to talk? We're going to talk about what's happening on the news. And we're going to talk about like the 1,000 new Israeli restaurants that have opened in New York recently. And what are the voices of Israel that we want to be thinking about? And what are the realities on the ground that we want to be acknowledging?
Great. So
can I make one more point?
No,
Are there
please.
more questions? Okay. So what I always really strive to finish and to close with, whenever I have the opportunity to teach, and this I heard a podcast truly like before all of this happened, so I promise this was not like pre-planned, and it said, a calling is where your joy meets the world's needs. My joy is to teach. My joy is not to teach about massacres and how to respond to them. I cannot stress that enough, but my joy is to be able to have moments of connection through Jewish teaching, whatever that looks like. And if I have the pleasure of being with someone for an entire year of learning, or if I have the pleasure of, unfortunately, 1 hour on a virtual call, it's my honor and my calling and my joy. And I hope that you come away from it feeling deeply unsatisfied, that nobody comes away saying, Samantha told us what we need to know and like check plus, and now I'm going to go do something else. But that I've left you with something, that there's a conversation that your family is going to have. There's a next step that you're going to follow, that you're going to follow me on Instagram and actually hear what I say at 4:30 in the morning, because apparently people are seeing that. Now, whatever it looks like, whatever relationship moment comes from this in your family, within the various synagogues, within the New York Jewish community, that something comes from it. And to thank you all for taking your time to be here and to be part of, and to bring your questions and to bring your complexities, and to approach this with the care that obviously is coming through in all of these questions.
So I want to thank Samantha so much for being with us, and we're just going to close with a prayer for peace, which I think all of us need in this moment.
I'm going to invite you, if you're able to stand in body or in spirit, for the prayer for peace, just as a way of elevating yourself in this moment to pray. Yehi shalom milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, shetivatel milchamot u'shfichut damim min ha'olam, v'tashkin shalom ba'olam, v'lo yisa goy al goy charev, v'lo yilmedu od milchama. Yakiru v'yedu kol yoshvei tevel, shelo banu le'olam bishvil riv u'machloket, v'lo bishvil sin'a v'kin'a v'kintor u'shfichut damim. Rak banu le'olam kedei lahakir otcha, titbarach lanetzach. Uvechein tirachem aleinu v'yikuyam banu mikra shekatuv, v'natati shalom ba'aretz, u'shchavtem ve'ein macharid, v'hishbati chaya ra'a min ha'aretz, v'cherev lo ta'avor ba'artzachem, v'yigal kamayim mishpat u'tztaka kenachal eitan, ki mal'a ha'aretz de'a et Adonai kamayim layam mechasim.
May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world. Then nation will not threaten nation, and the human family will not again know war. For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love. Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion. Fulfill the promise conveyed in scriptures. I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you. I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and I shall not be ravaged by war. Let justice and righteousness flow like a mighty stream. Let God's peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you all for being here tonight, and we will be in touch with a recording, and anything else, feel free to reach out to your congregations. Thank you so much to Samantha for being our guest.
Thank you all.